In this episode, I'm going to be sharing my 6-step end-of-year goal-setting reset routine. We are going to cover everything from the science that you need to know for your goal setting to the books that I recommend for this time of the year. So grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. The end of year month is my favourite time of the year. Here in Australia, it is our summer, it is the festive season, and it is also my favourite time of the year because this is when my goal setting goes into overdrive. This is my favourite time to reset, reimagine, and recreate. And I often get asked a lot of questions about my goal setting routine because it is a little bit strange in some places, it's a little bit intense, it's a little bit different. So I wanted to be able to share some of my tips with you in the hopes that maybe for your own reset routine, you might find some inspiration as well. So let's dive into my first tip. Tip number 1 is to plan your goals months ahead. If you are a regular watcher of my YouTube channel or if you listen to my podcast, then you would know that I am a big fan of the 12-week year mindset. And if you're not familiar with this is based on the book by Brian P. Morgan and Michael Lennington, where they get you to completely forget annualized thinking. This isn't about 12 weeks being a quarter of a year. This is about 12 weeks being the year. Because if calendars are a human construct, then why can't you redefine your own sense of time? And the reason why this is really important is because it takes all of that hyper energy and productivity that you feel at the end of the year, and it allows you to apply that motivation throughout the entire year. So when we think in annualized thinking, we have the tendency to maybe become a little bit complacent because we think that we have so much time ahead of us to be able to achieve the goals that we have set. Whereas when we shorten that time frame, it increases our sense of urgency towards those goals. So I obviously am a big fan of the 12-week year, but the goal setter in me who has been really diligently setting annual goals for over a decade now can't help but still make this a part of my end of year reset routine. So what I do is make sure that I am still overlaying the 12-week year mindset into my goal setting planning. And a part of that is planning for my goals months ahead. So using those months of October to December to really explore my goals further as to what I want the next calendar year to look like. So if you think about the way that you operate in your work or in your business, this is probably also a time where you would really heighten your goal setting for the year ahead. So why not do that in your own personal goals as well, or in your personal brand goals or your personal development? So what I do is at the start of October, I start to think about where that vision that I already had for the year ahead is potentially going and how I can more specifically refine that into some clear goals. And I do this in a pretty casual way, just so I can make sure that I am capturing my thoughts really easily as they come to me. So all I do is I start to brainstorm my goals for the year in the Notes app in my phone. So over the period of these few months, I am reviewing these goals, I am keeping them in mind, I'm doing research into particular areas to see if this actually is going to make my goal list for the year ahead. Because in some cases, I do find that if I give myself those few months to be able to think about if that is really the best decision, then sometimes the goal actually just becomes vetoed and I find that it's not actually suitable. But because I've given myself that period to really evaluate the credibility, the validity of that goal, then it doesn't become something that I just commit to in January and just go ahead with full steam when it may not actually be the right decision. And pre-planning your goals so far in advance months allows you to actually be able to hit the ground running for a lot of those goals in January. For example, instead of deciding in January that there is this major activity, this major project, this major new habit that you want to incorporate into your life, you've had months to be able to prepare for that thing, to plan for that thing. For example, when I first launched my blog, my YouTube channel, and my podcast, I did the majority of a lot of the planning and, even some of the pre-production work in those months prior to it actually launching. And so that meant that in January, I didn't have to enter this new activity feeling completely lost. I felt really confident in that space by the start of the year to make sure that I was set up for success to continue to do those things. So after I have worked through the less formal aspect of my goal setting, I will use the Christmas break or the holiday season, so those weeks over Christmas and New Year, to really think about refining those down to the goals that I want to finalize for myself. Which brings me to my next tip. Tip number 2 is to write your goals down. As I mentioned, I've been writing my goals in my phone for over a decade. And what I love about doing it in my phone is that over time, I start to see the different years chronologically stacked up on top of each other. And whenever I want to, I can go back and have a little bit of a glance over some of my earlier goals. I first started writing down my goals purely because I could not remember all of the ideas that I had in the goal setting space. I would sometimes have lists up to 40 different things of the things that I wanted to achieve in a particular year. I have since learned the art of refining your goals down to the most important priorities, but I've also learned more about the science behind why actually writing down your goals is important. There is research that shows that by writing down your goals, you increase your likelihood of achieving those things by 42%. So this is compared to people who only thought about their goals. This is in part because of a concept called psychological ownership. And this is where we experience a sense of attachment, responsibility, and control over objects, tasks, or ideas. So by writing down your goals, you increase your sense of that goal being a part of your identity. You're increasing your psychological ownership. And as a result of that, you feel more of a responsibility in taking care of that goal, in putting in more effort. You feel more committed to that thing. There also is value in physically writing things down. So I do make sure that there is an element of this in my end of year goal setting routine. A few years ago, when I was going through a bit of a change in life, my husband, then boyfriend, gifted me a little trinket tray that had a really inspiring little saying on there. And that now lives under our Christmas tree. It's a part of our Christmas tree decorating routine that we leave it there during the Christmas period. And we started to use that to write down our intentions for the year on a little piece of paper. And we fold that up and we put it into the little tray in the little box that lives under the tree. And we leave the intentions from previous years there as well. And then we take a few minutes over the Christmas season to sit down together and to open up some of the intentions from the previous years and have a little bit of a reflection about how we think we went in achieving those things, maybe our progress that we have made so far towards that thing, and then we write down our intention for the year ahead. We pop that back into its tray and in its box, and we don't look at it again until the following year. And this leads nicely into tip number 3, which is to share your goals with a friend. The same research that showed the value of writing down your goals and that being able to increase your likelihood of success also showed that when you share your goals with other people, this will increase your likelihood of success as well. The research showed that people who were sending little weekly reports to the person that was, I guess, what you could call their accountability partner, actually were more likely to achieve their goals. They performed better than the people who did not do that step. Now, I don't send my husband weekly reports about my goal setting, but he certainly does have to hear about it at our dining room table. What this creates when you share your goals with another person is, again, a psychological phenomenon that relates to making a public commitment. So once we have shared something with another person, if we don't follow through with that thing, it creates an element of cognitive dissonance in our minds because we want our actions to be able to match our words. And if it doesn't, we feel this sense of discomfort. So by sharing your goals with another person, you will increase the likelihood that you will actually push through with the effort, the commitment, the actions required to actually execute on that initial idea. Tip number 4 is to create vision boards. Now, I have to admit, though I have been writing down my goals for over a decade, this is very much the most recent step in my end of year goal setting routine. I would often hear about people creating vision boards, and I thought that it was a really fun project. Maybe it was enjoyable to do, and I, to some degree, thought maybe it was a little bit of a just fluffy woohoo concept. But then I learned more of the science behind why vision boards actually are really valuable. Vision boards is psychology and creativity at its best. In the professional sphere, in the corporate space, in the personal development space, I often hear a lot of people promoting the value of writing down goals. This isn't new. But I hear a lot less people in those spheres talking about vision boarding. Maybe it is because they feel a little bit like some of the things that I mentioned I felt towards it previously. Or maybe they're worried that if they talk about it, that maybe they won't be taken seriously. So let's get into some of the specifics behind the science of visualization. There has been a study that asked its participants to flex their muscles for several weeks, and they compared those people with a group of people who were only told to visualize flexing their muscles for a few weeks. And what that showed was that the people who visualized flexing their muscles, that is all they did, they didn't physically flex their muscles, actually increased the strength that they had in their bicep by over 13%. These can seem outrageous, but your brain is a beautiful thing. In neurolinguistics programming, or NLP, it argues that your mind can't differentiate between what is real and what is vividly imagined. So detailed visualization for desired outcomes becomes a form of mental rehearsal. It allows you to align your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors to that desired outcome. But the key is detailed visualization. So make sure that your vision board is very specific to the goals that you want to achieve. What is it actually going to look like when you get that thing? If you want to learn more about the specifics of how I tackle my vision boarding, because I actually do this in an annual way and then I break it down into different strategies as well, check out my previous episode on building your vision boards on Pinterest. But when it comes to my annual vision board, I actually just designed this on Canva, and it is a really nice little project to work on in that end of year break over the Christmas New Year period. So I make sure that it is something that I give myself as a little side task to all of the usual festive season activity, and that it's complete by the start of the year. And then I download my vision board and I set it as the backdrop on my laptop. So it is something that I see be almost every day, where I spend the majority of my time, I'm constantly reminded of these things that I'm working towards. So visualization becomes naturally embedded into my routine. Now, in those really early weeks of January, I might still find that there are a couple things that I have changed my mind on, or I'm refining a little bit further. So in those early weeks, I do take that opportunity, it being a digital vision board, to make some edits and redo it in certain places and then re-download it and upload it again. Tip number 5 is to give something up to get uncomfortable. Now, this is the part of my goal setting routine that has the most people asking me questions over the festive season, because it piques their curiosity, or to be honest, they might just think it is a little bit strange. But regardless, I want to share it because I do think that there is a lot of value in it. For 6 years now, I have been giving up something for a 1-year period. This has included things like subscriptions for streaming, chocolate, clothes shopping, and other things. And it started with me actually wanting to see if I could give up alcohol for 1 year. And what I found was that it was actually a really interesting challenge, because I loved how uncomfortable it made me in certain situations, and that sense of being uncomfortable had to last for an entire year. So when I had done the 1 year of giving up alcohol, it was something that I really wanted to see if I could do in other areas as well. I have to admit, this has become more tricky as the years pass to think of new things. I was still finalizing what those things would be with people at the party that I went to for New Year's this year. But I really make sure that by the time the clock strikes 12, that I know what that thing is going to potentially be, or at least have my top ideas in that space, because I want to make sure that whatever it is that I go into the 1st of January, not actually consuming that thing, or whatever it is, making sure that I avoid that thing. Now, this is just something that I started to do on my own, but I came to recognize this concept in a phrase that I heard called voluntary deprivation. And this is about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations to build your resilience. So you're actually giving up something for the sake of it, just to show yourself that you can. So that if you were ever in a situation where you maybe had to give up more things, or you didn't have access to all of the things that are a part of your lifestyle, for example, now, that you have over time built up that resilience to not actually be so reliant on your lifestyle. Now, there is a lot of discussion in the end of year and the start of year conversations about upgrading, about leveling up your lifestyle, but we don't often talk about the value of downgrading your lifestyle. In his book, Discipline is Destiny, Ryan Holiday talks about the Stoic tradition of giving up excess. And as an example, he shares the inspiring story of Reuben Carter. Reuben Carter is a boxer who was wrongfully imprisoned for 19 years. Now, I am in no way trying to compare me giving up chocolate for a year to Reuben Carter. But what that story highlights is that he did not actually use his wealth to see him through that really unjust period. He actually used his mindset and did quite the opposite. So instead of enjoying any of the luxuries that prison had to offer, things like pillows, rugs, TV, he actually made a very conceded effort to not actually engage with those things, because that meant that there was no other leverage over him. There wasn't things that the guard could take away from him, because he wasn't reliant on those things. He was building up his resilience to be in the toughest environment that he could be. But in your more day-to-day circumstances, when you think about your own lifestyle, what are some elements that could potentially be taken away? There is a quote in the book that says, "By being strict with ourselves, we take away others' power over us." When you think about you having to stay in a job that you maybe don't love because your lifestyle is something that you can't afford without a particular level of salary, by downgrading your lifestyle in certain elements, you give yourself more freedom to be able to make those choices without feeling like you actually don't have an option. Whether it is clothes shopping or subscriptions, ask yourself what you might be able to do without. Now, of course, my episodes are never complete without talking more about books. So for tip number 6, I want to encourage you to read for end of year inspiration. I know this is the time of the year that a lot of people like to pick what their holiday reading will be, and of course there's going to be things that you will read in that period just for fun, but maybe consider as well if there's any value in that period for you to read more specifically related to things that may help you achieve your goals or for the year ahead. I specifically switched to things having a very certain focus on that sort of area during the holiday season. And just to give you some of my go-to recommendations, if you are looking for inspiration in this space, some of the books that I have read over and over again includes books like The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin, of course The 12-Week Year by Brian P. Morgan and Michael Lennington, Ikigai by Hector Garcia and Francesc Morales, and also, of course, my favorite author, Robert Kiyosaki, and his Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you're looking for more inspiration for books to read to finish off 2024, then check out my previous episode on the 5 books to read in 2024. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.